Hello, this is Lisa with Unexplained America, and this week we'll be covering part 2 of the Dr. Andrew Bagby case. Now, before we get started, just some quick business. Just please go on to my website, unexplainedamerica.com, to look at all the merch options. I do have a decal, t-shirt, hat, so go take a look, order. Get some unexplained merch. And also go check me out on all of the social medias. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. And of course you can listen on all the platforms. So yay. So very excited to be with you guys this week. This case was terrible. If you haven't listened to part 1, go back and listen to part 1. But this is part 2, and this will kind of bring us to a close on this case at least. But it is just an extremely sad case. Like, had a listener discretion alert for the part 1, and it's the kind of same thing in here. There is a warning about, of course, murder, suicide discussion, and then just in terrible murdering of a child in this one. So just please, listener discretion on this. So very, very tough case. We are going to get started. Now, we discussed, of course, in part 1 with Shirley leaving the United States and going to her, home base in Canada and at the advice of her attorney. So where we kind of left off was like November 12th of 2000. Okay, so she knows she's kind of being investigated. Her, she has dual citizenship, and so she has gone. Shirley makes it to Toronto, and she checks into a hotel there. She does call her older daughter, who by this time is 16 years old, and her daughter comes to be with her, okay? Now, Shirley tells her that she is there staying in a hotel, and she tells her that she had actually been staying in hotels in the States since Andrew had been murdered because she was afraid that his murder would come after her. So this is the tale that she's telling, because she says that she had met Andrew in the park with the gun. So she does put herself in the park. She does say that she gave Andrew the gun to her daughter, at least. She's going to be telling all kinds of tales all over the place. But this is what she's telling her daughter, that she's afraid for her own life and that she's a target. Turning it around to make herself a victim here, okay? Now, she does state her fear was why she left the United States to begin with. And again, she's going to have multiple stories about why she's even in Canada. This is just one of the many stories. Now, she told some other extended family members in the same time frame. If this, Shirley, I will say, is a talker, a very big talker. She talks to everybody. In case you didn't notice in part 1, she is going to talk, and she's going to talk a lot, and she's going to talk to everyone. So she is talking to extended family members, and she tells them that she's in Canada for the reason of recreation. Then she'll tell other people and friends that she is there because TJ, her son, was seriously injured. Which, okay, so the background on this, I will say, TJ was involved in like an auto accident, I want to say around November 10th, okay? So he's headed out of town, out of St. John, and this is November in Newfoundland, Canada. It's icy, it's cold, so he does get into an accident. He is not injured. It is very minor situation. Incidentally, he does get in another accident, but it doesn't happen until actually, like, Shirley is already in Canada. So I think it happens later in the day on the 12th. And she's not even notified until the 13th of his accident. But she is going to tell people, some people, that she is actually in Canada just to be with TJ. And I will say later on, way later down the road, her attorney is actually going to be depositioned, and he would state that he did tell her to go to Canada. So she did in fact get advice from her United States attorney to go to Canada because knew the law, and you'll see why they told her. Yeah. So there would be, and incidentally, much later on too, there would be an affidavit by Shirley stating she had gone to Canada for actually the death of a friend. So she would again be telling multiple stories about the reason she was in Canada, the reason for everything. There was always multiple angles with Shirley. Okay. And I will say the accident that TJ had on the 12th was more serious. Okay. So I will say that he did have a more serious accident. I think there was a threat that he had even punctured his lung. He was taken to hospital. Like, it was a more serious accident than the original one. Now, I told you guys, again, just to back up the story. So, additional stories that Shirley was telling was she was telling some of her Canadian friends that Andrew was actually killed in a drive-by shooting in Latrobe, that he was standing in the street and actually got gunned down. So this is, again, just a lot of stories, just a lot of phooey going on, and these people, they don't know the difference. So she is just saying whatever she wishes to say. At that point, they don't know that. Now, on November 13th, Shirley does go to Corner Brook to be with TJ because he was going to have like maybe a surgery. Like I said, this was a more serious accident that he had on the 12th, and they did think that his lung was punctured. At this point, Shirley is still communicating with Heather, and she tells her that she is in Canada for TJ and to drive him from Corner Brook home to St. John, where, he normally lives. So he doesn't normally live in St. John because he is going to university there. Now, Shirley does drive TJ home from Corner Brook to St. John on the 16th, and she will remain in St. John indefinitely through the rest of this case. Now, I did say in part 1 that this whole case, this Dr. Bagby case, and I was familiar with it because I had seen a documentary, which I will plug in my notes, although I did not use it as a quote-unquote reference. But it is interesting, and we'll discuss that. Megs, my good listener friend, she did request this episode, and Megs actually lives in St. John, Newfoundland and Labrador in Canada, and very cool. So she did send me in some information because, again, she lives right where this all happened. Little tidbits, little side note about St. John's. So it is the most easterly city in North America. I mean, the most. Does have the historic site of Cape Spear, and that is like the actual easterly point. If you are a member of my Patreon, you need to listen to the Titanic episode that I did for you guys, and we get into this. And I'm going to say this wrong, Giglium, I'm going to say his name wrong. The Marconi guy, he received the first transatlantic wireless communication in St. John's, which is marked by Cabot Tower, which is on that historic site, Signal Hill. So it's there in St. John. That's like the first wireless communication happened there. And it's like a whole hub there. And so during the time of the Titanic, when it went down, this whole system was very important, obviously, but go check that out. Become a Patreon and listen to that. Now, George Street in downtown St. John has the highest density of bars per square foot, like a little side note. And the oldest bar on George Street is called Christian's Pub, and you can become an honorary Newfoundlander by participating in what's called a screechin'. And it's a ceremony involving reciting a verse, usually composed of Newfi slang. That's very interesting. Kissing a codfish and taking a shot of screech. It also involves eating some Newfi steak, which is bologna. I like bologna. And yeah, it's so interesting. So there is also a Jelly Bean Row, is a very touristy attraction in St. John's. There are townhouses scattered all over downtown, painted in these bright colors, which makes it the jelly bean situation. Newfoundland is also called the Rock because it is a very rocky terrain. And we will talk about that too, because that comes into play with the end of the case, like where Dr. Shirley Turner ends up. Okay. Newfoundland and Labrador does have its own time zone that differs half an hour from the coordinated universal time. That is super interesting. I didn't even think about that. Fun sayings and slang. What are you at? That is that is interesting. Maze, you'll have to let me know if I say that correctly. But this is a greeting of like hello or asking what you're up to. And then there's another got her scaled, which means everything's working out for you. You got what you want. Oh my goodness, that's so fun. Stay where you at till I comes where you to. Wow. Stay there until I get there. And then who knit ya? And that means like who your parents or family is. That is so, so awesome. So just kind of some slang from St. John's. Okay, so that is just awesome. But I will have some pictures of actual St. John taken by Megs, and I will be posting them along with this episode when this comes out. So watch for that on the social media. But yes, Shirley drives to St. John. Again, St. John is where she had lived. This is where she had originally met Dr. Bagby, Dr. Andrew. Now her son is there. So again, she will be there for this whole entire case. Shirley settles into the apartment that her son is literally sharing. I mean, he's in college. He is sharing an apartment with friends. So she actually moves in with them to begin with. On the 18th, she meets a physician for a psychiatrist, but she does want to protect, and she explains it has to do with her grief about her boyfriend being murdered. But what she's wanting is a particular doctor to be referred to, which is a Dr. John Doucet. Like, she had known him. She had actually worked with him when she was a fourth-year student. So she knew this Dr. Doucet. Now, she meets with him on the 20th. And Dr. Doucet states, based on this communication, these are things coming from her. She's just talking to him about her grief, her feelings, and all of this is stemming from the death of Andrew and then her son's accident and being pregnant. So she's telling him she's pregnant. Now, he states she's anxious, depressed, has some PTSD and bereavement from this conversation that he has with her. Now, kind of going a little bit back. So on the 16th, Shirley leaves a message for Heather because she was wanting to borrow a stethoscope. She says because she wanted to listen, like to use on her son. Now, she ends up just showing up at Heather's place at 1 a.m. in the morning, which would have been more like the 17th. This totally freaks Heather out. Everybody surrounding Andrew's life, his parents and Heather, I mean, they're very concerned. They're very concerned. They feel like Shirley definitely had everything to do with his death. So this was alarming. So Heather had literally tried to call a friend who wasn't available because she didn't want to be there alone with Shirley. Well, Shirley ends up coming in. She's just very aggressive and upsets Heather. And yes, and she talks about how she's going to go to, there is like a scheduled memorial service happening on the 20th. And then she's talking about how she's so glad that they were going to have it in the auditorium instead of a church, because she's telling Heather allegedly that, Andrew didn't have any, he was an atheist. And so, she didn't appreciate the fact that Andrew's parents had him an actual funeral back in California and such. There are several memorial services. Andrew was very loved. He had formed many relationships. So there was like a little service in Pennsylvania, and then of course his parents had a memorial service in California. And I will say they really tried to, of course, granted, they are very, very, very concerned about Shirley being the culprit, but they knew that she had gone to Canada, and they were trying to lure her back to the States by inviting her to his memorial service in California. So they were trying to lure her back, but definitely his parents are grieving. They're holding memorial services, and then, of course, this memorial service by the actual university, the Faculty of Medicine department, this memorial in Canada is being held November 20th, which is that same day she met with Dr. Doucet. So, kind of bring that all together. Now, additionally, Heather was experiencing several phone calls from Shirley, kind of going over the same nonsense. Like, Shirley kept asking, for the Bagby's connections. Well, she had their phone numbers. I mean, she had literally called them. She knew how to get in touch with them, but she kept bothering Heather for different things like that and how to connect with, the Bagbys. And cryptically, on or about the 19th, she does mention to Heather that she'll be sticking around St. John's and she will be rounder as she's sticking around, quote unquote. So she's cryptically telling Heather on the 19th that she's pregnant. But remember, she had told Heather, that she had miscarried. So she had told her that, so Heather is very confused by this. Of course, she's concerned in general about any contact at all with Shirley. Okay. So it's not wanted. It's not warranted. None of this is. And of course, Shirley's in the States. The Bagbys were holding their memorials, and then they will be at the memorial in Canada, by the way. So they are in Canada on the 20th. On the 19th of November, the Pennsylvania State Troopers, they request of the Constabulary's Intelligence Unit, they're in Canada, Newfoundland, they request for them to open a file on Dr. Shirley Turner, which they do open on the 20th, the same day as the memorial. In response to this request, and knowing about this memorial service and everything going on, the unit deploys 2 members to connect with the Memorial University security office to video and photograph Andrew's memorial service on the 20th. This service is being held at 12:30 p.m. Now, most, if not all, of the faculty of the School of Medicine are there, and students and everybody that was connected to Andrew. And again, he's beloved, and he's, he knows everybody. This was, I think I went over this, it's a pretty small program. So these people become very interlinked. And of course, Heather knows people. She's in the program. And then Shirley knows people because of going through the program. So everything's pretty connected there. Now, Shirley attends. She does attend. She had mentioned that she was going to speak, but she didn't. She did not speak. She wasn't asked to speak. She does show up. Everybody there notates how crying and sobbing Shirley is. She kind of sits in the back. She is sobbing loudly. A lot of people feel like she is putting on, quote unquote, a show, so to speak. Now, Andrew's parents, they do have Heather participate in the memorial there. And afterwards, Shirley verbally attacks Heather for being involved, discusses how Heather never meant anything to Andrew, that Shirley meant everything to Andrew, blah, blah, blah. She just verbally attacks her. Now, by 4:30, Heather, she gets with the university security. She's not knowing this collusion with the constabulary office or their collusion with the Pennsylvania troopers. Okay, just FYI. But she gets with them and tells them everything that's going on with Shirley, and that she is very concerned for her own safety, and that Shirley point blank told her she's not going back to the United States. So Heather tells them this. So they have this intel. Of course, a lot's going on behind the scenes. They're monitoring Shirley, by the way. On November 21st, the day after the memorial, Heather gives a sworn statement to the actual intelligence unit. So then the security people get with them, they go ahead and, okay, come in and do a statement. So she actually gives a statement. She says Shirley is still calling her, she was continually calling her, even though Shirley was verbally attacking her, the day, because she was mad. Literally, Shirley calls her on the 21st, that same day, or the day after this happened, and acts like nothing happened. It's like this woman she just doesn't even remember what she did the day before. And again, she talks so much. They describe her talking as turning on a tab and water flowing. That's how much she talks, and how frequently, she just, it's just turning it on and it's just running. And by the way, the constabulary unit, they do have officers patrol around Heather, the security, she is being watched for safety purposes for a period of time. And now on November 27th, Shirley talks to David Bagby, again, Andrew's dad. And in this conversation, she tells him that she plans to stay in Canada, kind of solidifying this. Now, she says a lot of things. She says that her attorney made her go to Canada. She talks about the gun. She talks about a lot of things. She even mentions being pregnant, but not really. And so David never knows what to believe, what not to believe from her. Now, that very same day in Pennsylvania, they are actually issuing the the warrant for her arrest from Pennsylvania. So her warrant for her arrest is on one count of murder in first degree of Dr. Andrew Bagby, and then secondly, the count is criminal homicide. They know Pennsylvania, the state, they know that she's in Canada, they know she's, not coming back. So they have to actually begin the process once this happens of actually filing the extradition. I will say this. They, of course, are in constant communication with the Constabulary Intelligence Unit. So on November 28th, the unit does have evidence. Actually, there's kind of two things going on the 28th. So they have evidence that Shirley arranges for an overnight package to be sent to her Iowa attorney. And in that package, she's sending the keys for her Council Bluff apartment and then her mailbox key for her apartment as well. Now, the unit notes that Shirley is staying with her son and requests that an alert be placed on all packages like coming from Shirley and going to the States, and also vice versa. So basically, they're going to be looking at her packages as they cross the border. And they said use caution against her because she has, quote unquote, suicidal tendencies. Now, this is being told to the intelligence unit. That same day as well, the unit they contact Shirley and set up a meeting. And so she requests to go meet with him, and they let her know. So on the 28th, they let her know that the Pennsylvania, state has actually filed a warrant for her arrest. So she is made aware. Okay, so she is aware of that. Now, by the next day, November 29th, 2001, so Shirley actually has an ultrasound. Also, kind of note this, there are students in the medical school there, they call it the Faculty of Medicine program. There's faculty and personnel that Shirley is speaking to. And again, she's constantly in communications, good and bad, with all, she talks. They are talking to the police. All these people are talking to the police about how they are concerned about Shirley being around. And this is on the 29th. So they're not aware of what's going on in the background. Obviously, they don't know the Constabulary police are watching her. They don't know that there's been an arrest warrant filed for her in Pennsylvania. Like, these people don't know. All they know is that she's acting weird. She's saying weird things. They're very concerned. And one graduate of the program is friends with Shirley and is friends with another graduate. And evidently, Shirley had told this graduate that she told them that she was actually in the parking lot that day Andrew was murdered. So that was very concerning, and they wanted to relay that to the police. By December 1st, the Pennsylvania, troopers, they execute a second search warrant in Shirley's Council Bluff apartment, and they do seize her clothing items and shoes. Now, on December 2nd, while Shirley is under surveillance from the Criminal Intelligence Unit, they see her put out trash at TJ's apartment, and they confiscate it. Within this trash, that they have confiscated, is documentation about the ultrasound. So they do find 2 ultrasound cards, like actually endorsed by Shirley herself, and they read like Shirley's name, Andrew's name, the conception date of 10/20/2001, and then expected due date for the baby of July 13th of 2002. So this is what they find in the trash. Now, on December 12th at 11:20 a.m., with the warrant granted from the court to the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary, 2 constables, along with Shirley's attorney, his name is Randy Piercy. He's going to be with Shirley kind of this whole way through. They go to the apartment of Angie's with TJ, and they go to arrest Shirley. And she is aware of what's coming down, okay? Her attorney's there. She is aware. So she is then brought to the constabulary headquarters in St. John. Now, at 2:10, Shirley is escorted into the courthouse. And by the way, David and Kate are present. So again, they had been going back and forth from California to, Canada. They were fully aware of her arrest warrant. They've been in communication with the police. Like they're aware, they're there. Now, what they're not aware of is that Shirley and them have always, like her attorney, along with like the prosecutor there, they have already made an arrangement for what we would call bail. So there is an arrangement filed already in motion. So she is actually released on, again, what we call bail, and they would call recognizance. So they basically set in stone that she would be released. So she is released. There are more hearings scheduled. So the Bagbys, of course, are shocked. Like, this is absolutely unthinkable for them. They couldn't believe, of course, that Shirley is granted bail. They don't understand this. Again, the Crown's royal prosecution, they were on agreement. They say that Dr. Turner wasn't a risk to the public. So, and the amount that they had already agreed on for the bail was $75,000. And they call this sureties. Okay, now this gets very convoluted, but $65,000 of the $75,000 was put up in sureties. Now, this doesn't mean that any actual monies changed hands at all, by the way. It's just basically saying, I'm going to sign for this bail, this bond, the surety of this amount. So this person does have to, it's basically like taking their word, they're signing for it, and $65,000 is signed by Shirley's psychiatrist, Dr. Doucet. Yes. The other $10,000 is split, and it says that the sureties are signed by spouses. And I would imagine the two ex-spouses of her signed. Now, this isn't 100% clear, but that's what the paperwork says. $10,000 is put aside by the spouses. $65,000 is Dr. Doucet. Now, they do have to kind of, quote unquote, show that they would kind of have the money to put up in the case, I guess, that she ran, but really no money is changing hands in this situation. Now, the terms of Shirley's release is that she report weekly to the Newfoundland Constabulary, so she has to report weekly. She has to live in St. John. She cannot leave. If she's moving within St. John, she has to give a 24-hour notice. So right now, again, she's been living with TJ. That's the address. So she would have to give notice if, like, she was leaving his address. She cannot leave Newfoundland and obviously Canada. In fact, she has to surrender both her Canadian and U.S. passports. She cannot have any weapons, and she cannot have any contact or communication with Andrew's family. And there were like 7 other named persons. One of the persons was that man in Philadelphia that she had all those, the one that she had dated before meeting Andrew, the one that she had, had the suicide attempt outside his door. So his name is listed. Andrew's parents are listed. That man in Philadelphia, his parents are listed. Heather is listed. And then there's like 2 graduates from Memorial, and then a faculty member listed. And this faculty member, okay, so the 2 graduates were listed because they were the ones that gave police information about her statements, remember? Now, I don't know what this faculty member had anything to do with, but this faculty member was listed, and they had actually supervised Shirley during her residency. So all of these people can no longer be communicated with, period. Now, the next hearing set for Shirley was her extradition, case. That was the start of it. I will say, the Bagbys were warned that this would be just a long, drawn-out situation in Canada. So, evidently, Canada, although, of course, we have, and this is in 2001. I have no idea if this is the same. Of course, we share a very, I think, good relationship with Canada. And they like us, we like them, blah, blah, blah. but they're not trusting completely in our legal procedures, probably because they're so different. And they do not, one of the things that will come up repeatedly is that if she is extradited, like if Shirley was actually extradited to the United States, it would have to be with the promise that she would not face the death penalty. Like over and over again, that was repeated. So that was like a must. So, anywho, so they just don't trust it. So the extradition process is wildly difficult, like very difficult. So this first hearing that even happens, and just to tell you, so Shirley is out. This is horrific. Of course, the Bagbys are sitting here like, okay, this woman is completely free. She's living it up. She is socializing. She is going places. She's doing things. She gets to see, all of her family and friends. And she is facing first-degree murder charge. First-degree murder. And she is completely scot-free, out on bail. So they are, of course, devastated. It's absolutely devastating. Now, Shirley had been living... Oh, let's go back. Again, the Bagbys are heartbroken. They are heartbroken and grieving. They do go home. They're going back and forth, but they do plan on being at everything they can be. So they have the hearing in February. The Bagbys are there. This hearing is literally just a hearing to even discuss or acknowledge the extradition request, okay? So this is how slow this is going. And the hearings are about once a month. So, it's like January, there was a hearing just about to talk about the bail that was set already. And I will say that this is being covered in the Canadian papers. It's being covered in the Pennsylvania papers, this like doctor, on bail for murder, like it's very publicized. It's very, again, I do think it seems like there's just not as much crime. So this is a very big story in Canada and in the United States, okay? Making national headlines for sure. Now, Shirley is living with her son, but by January, TJ has had enough of Shirley. Little too much togetherness time, because again, she's been there since November, and he's living with friends. I'm sure it's not just TJ. I'm sure it's probably his friends too. I don't know. Now, Shirley had allegedly sold his computer for cash and then some other things, so he asked her to move out. Now, she does move out, but as she's leaving, he alleges that she takes with her his video camera. So she takes, she's taking his belongings, she's selling them, okay? And again, she's not able to work. So she's not working. Who knows how much money she had, just from her little bit of work that she had done, in the United States. Again, this woman spent all this time and all this effort becoming a doctor, to do something with herself. And yeah, this is where we land. Stealing electronics from, your son, who, again, I mean, at this time, he's only maybe like 18. Yeah, if her other daughter, 18, 19, like he's very young. So Shirley moves out. She is living somewhere else. She gets her own apartment in St. John. Of course, she has to stay there. Now, by January 27th, she does start a diary, and it is something that will be looked at in the future. But she does start the diary for her unborn child to read when the child is 18 plus. So at the February hearing, there is a mention, and there's like a little press conference called. Shirley officially announces to everybody, the Bagbys, the courts, everybody, that she is 4 months pregnant with Andrew's baby. Now, the Bagbys, again, they had heard her cryptically mention such to them. And remember, she had cryptically mentioned something to Heather. But again, now, of course, the Bagbys are, feeling all kinds of emotions. This changes everything. But then on the flip side, Shirley has repeatedly not told the truth, lied, whatever. So they just don't know what to believe. They can't get a paternity test done until, the baby is actually there. So the baby has to be there, and that's not until July. So already the Bagbys are committed to the advocacy of Andrew, his death and being there to see justice, done in this case. And they decide to continue on and fight for, Andrew, but also fight for the baby as well, no matter what paternity test turns out to be. And they literally quit their work in California. They pick up their lives and they rent a place in St. John. And they, go ahead and get their own attorney. Now, they do have an attorney. Her name is Jackie Brazil. Later on, they will have another attorney, John Ennis, who will do a lot of speaking on their behalf, interviews and such. So they go ahead and get an attorney procured because they're going to, they're going to fight for advocacy for Andrew in Canada, and then also for this baby. And that means you have to have, an attorney. You have to. So in March, the extradition request is actually approved. So this is just the request is approved. So this is March. Later on in March, they set a date of May 27th as a date to actually hear the reasons for or against the whole extradition, okay? And allegedly to make a decision, and that would be in May. Now, I will say, obviously, this woman, that gets very muddy because her attorneys are pointing out the fact that she is very pregnant, and especially going to be very, very pregnant in May. So you can imagine all that's going on in the meantime. So in April, this is a little side note. Of course, Shirley is dealing with the extradition, and she is pregnant. And of course, she's on her own there. She's living in her apartment. Well, she's still being Shirley. She's still toiling. There's still other stuff going on. So a little backstory. So she had actually gone to see her youngest daughter in December. And her youngest daughter is living with, her dad, which would be Shirley's, second ex-husband, and then like a stepmom. Okay, so she had gone to see them. This was before she was officially arrested. So she had stayed with them and visited them and then come back actually on December 12th. And then that was when she was arrested and went through with, the bail and such. Now, Shirley asked the ex-husband if her 12-year-old, so she's 12 now, could fly in to be with her at the end of March for like an Easter break. It was like I guess what we would think of is like a spring break, but they call it an Easter break. It's at the end of March going into the 1st of April. Well, he agrees only if the older daughter is present as well. Okay. I mean, he was very concerned. Shirley is on bail for murder. And so he didn't exactly feel comfortable with his daughter, being alone with Shirley. So both daughters fly in. And again, they live like 11 hours or so away. Okay. They live very far away. They're not in St. John like TJ. Now, the older daughter ends up actually cutting the trip early because her and Shirley get into it, and go figure, get into it, and allegedly Shirley like slaps the older daughter. I mean, it's ugly. It's just typical Shirley. Now, so by the end of this Easter trip, the younger daughter is with her. Well, Shirley tells her ex-husband that she's going to stay with her. Like, she's not coming back, okay? Now, legally, remember, Shirley legally has custody of the children. Like, whenever she had her divorce with like even her first husband and the second husband, she had legal custody. Now, she was the one that, sent the children back whenever she wanted to go to medical school. So that was just agreed. That wasn't in the courts. They never went back to court. They never changed the custody agreements. So legally, Shirley has rights. So now Shirley is in a battle with the ex and his wife, and they end up having to just deal with this because they're 11 hours away. They don't really have the rights. They don't have the means or the money to fight with Shirley in the courts. And Shirley is even, like, I will say, the Child Protective Services in Canada, they are in communications. They are aware of this. Shirley actually turns the stepmother into them and mentions that the stepmom had hit her daughter, like on the thigh, as like a disciplinary measure or whatever. And so this is all going on. This, it's like, is there not enough going on? This is what Shirley has going on. And I have a feeling why. So it is April 2002. Shirley is very pregnant. She's now dealing with, a custody battle or custody situation really with the ex for her younger daughter. She has the extradition, and then she does have the Bagbys who are advocating and asking Child Protective Services for help for the unborn baby. They're very concerned. They're concerned because, okay, the mom is, a suspected murderer. So, and again, Shirley is not licensed in Newfoundland to, and I don't even know how that would work. We'll kind of get into that, but she is not working. So she is actually getting income, from the country, basically like, I don't even know what we would call it here, but she's getting income for herself and she's getting income for her children. And so she is applying now that she has her younger daughter living with her. She is getting money from Canada for that child. And then, of course, she's applied for her unborn child. And then as the mother of two children, she gets a check for that. I don't know for sure. Obviously, she's not going to say, but did she want her younger daughter to live with her so she could get more money? I would think so. So by May, of course, you've had all that going on. You have Shirley's attorneys are fighting with the Crown's attorneys on the language of the extradition. So this is more hearing. So there's supposed to be an outcome, so to speak, in May. However, there's just a lot of back and forth, and it's just a lot of, okay, this doesn't match this, and then there's the translation from like French to English. So there's just a lot of little legal things that are huge delays. So nothing concrete is happening with Shirley's, extradition, okay? So Shirley, by June, had already decided, she knew she was having a son. She decided to name her son Zachary Andrew Turner. So she does tell people the name. Now, on Thursday, July 18th, so in the courts, you also have a very, very pregnant woman who's there, who's you're talking about. So, of course, her attorneys are saying, okay, she's pregnant. She's going to, she's going to give birth in July. There's really nothing, we need to put these hearings, put these decisions out because of that. So this is a push. Everything's just a push. Now, Shirley had already, I think back in June, had already decided to name her son. She knew she was having a boy, Zachary Andrew Turner. So she has the name picked out and everything. And by this time, again, the Bagbys are advocating, they're fighting for any type of like visitation rights and rights to the unborn baby. And this whole time, of course, Shirley has not been in communications with the Bagbys. She feels like they hate her. She killed their son. They feel like she feels concerned about them having any visitation with Zachary because of the feelings towards her, all of these things. And she's also alleging, to people that they don't even believe that it's their grandson. So, but the Bagbys are very stable. They're presenting themselves exemplary. Like the whole Canadian process is just seeing that they're just caring people that just want to protect this unborn baby, whether it is actually their sons or not, because they don't know. So that is all going on. Now, Thursday, July 18th of 2002, Shirley gives birth to Zachary via cesarean section at the Health Science Center in St. John. Now, Zachary is very healthy. He's a beautiful baby boy. He is 8 pounds, 8 ounces. The Bagbys, they do go to, the hospital. They want to be there, but they are not allowed to actually see Zachary. Like, she doesn't allow them to see her anything. And they bring him a gift. They're able to leave the gift or whatever but they don't actually get to see Zachary. Like, Shirley denies them. She was even upset about them being able to be there at all, but it is what it is. Now, Shirley is discharged from the hospital by the 21st. And during this time, again, she still has her 12-year-old child. So during this time, the 12-year-old is kind of being watched when she can by TJ. Okay, so he is kind of helping out. Evidently, there's a neighbor that helps out with the daughter, but the daughter is going some time without any parental guidance, so to speak. Now, the daughter is with her when she comes home. So, like, Zachary, and the 12-year-old, they do come home. They are together. Again, there was a couple of days where the 12-year-old had nobody with her, okay? Just FYI. And the Child Protection Services are having conversations. They are meeting. These things are being notated. And the fact that the girl is 12, she is old enough to, prepare food for herself, but still, she's a 12-year-old, okay? Now, finally, so they come home July 21st. By August, the Bagbys actually are awarded a small amount of supervision. They get 1 hour supervised visit weekly with Zachary. And of course, they fall in love with him. And as, of course, he's getting a little older, and this, like, they don't even start the visits till about, like, after he's, like, a month old or so, but they can see, even without a paternity test, that he is most definitely their grandchild. Like, they can tell. I mean, there are pictures all he posting along. I mean, he looks just like Andrew. I mean, it's just uncanny, and he is a beautiful little baby boy. Now, during this time, of course, Shirley is home. She's asking for more financial assistance for her 2 children. Okay, and she's trying to get assistance. She does have some friends that are getting her assistance, because this is all she has. Now, she also, I will say this, she, as much as she quote unquote doesn't like the Bagbys are giving, gifts. They're doing everything that they can to make sure that she is capable of taking care of Zachary. They are very concerned, obviously, but they are doing everything that they can to make sure that she's okay. And they're even providing, different things. Like, I mean, we're talking like taking them places. Like, she's not driving. She doesn't have a vehicle there. Like, whether taking her to this or that appointment, they buy a crib for Zachary. They buy things even for her 12-year-old. Like, they are providing. So she is kind of indifferent whenever she's talking to whether her attorney or the Child Protective Services people, which she's in communication with. She's kind of talking out of 2 sides of her mouth. Like, sometimes she's like, well, I just don't trust them. And the other times she's like, they are doing everything. They are really, she's being truthful and kind and talking about all the things that they have purchased for Zachary, things that they have helped her with, things that they have helped her with her, 12-year-old. So anyway, she's talking out of both sides of her mouth when in regard to David and Kate. And they're being very helpful. Now, from July until November, they're back and forth hearings. Nothing is really coming of the hearings. Okay. And also during this time, so, I say she's talking to Child Protective Services. So she does understand that she could possibly get extradited any moment. Okay. So this is in the back of her mind. And so she is talking to Child Protective Services about the options. And she's telling them, okay, I don't have any family or friends to take Zachary, but I'm concerned about the Bagbys getting Zachary if I go to jail or if I'm extradited. Okay. So she's going back and forth and again, talking out of 2 sides of her mouth. And it's very clear that she doesn't even know what she really wants. Okay. So you've got all these hearings going on. Nothing really is happening. But Thursday, November 14th, 2002, the judge rules yes for Shirley to be extradited. Now, this is written up in like an 80-paragraph decision, but this is some of the verbiage. The judge states, And this is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court's Trial Division. Now, this judge says, I am satisfied that taken together, the quote-unquote circumstantial evidence introduced on behalf of the United States creates a web of circumstances that, if unanswered, could lead to a properly instructed jury acting reasonably to draw the inference that the person who caused the death of Dr. Andrew Bagby was Shirley Jane Turner. In making this determination, I stress this is not a trial. Whether a jury applying the proper standard or proof in a criminal trial would in fact come to this conclusion that the person causing the death was Dr. Turner is, of course, quite another matter. But basically, they're saying they could have those conclusions there. So, with this being the case, Shirley is not a stupid woman. She has been going to these hearings. She has had an attorney, the Randy Piercy talking to her. So she is aware. She kind of knew this was coming. And she had made arrangements with the Bagbys to take care of Zachary in the event that she would be arrested or extradited. Okay. So on the 14th, Shirley is taken to the Newfoundland Correctional Center for Women in Clarenville, which is a little bit of a drive from St. John. Okay. So it's not right in St. John. Now, the Bagbys, again, she went ahead and made arrangements for the Bagbys to have Zachary while she's in prison, just while she's imprisoned. And this was conditional upon a few things. They would bring Zachary to see her in the prison at least once a week. And then also that she would get a collect call made once a day. She could call and talk to Zachary once a day. Okay. So Shirley goes to prison the 14th. There are about 2 weeks that her younger daughter, is just at home there. TJ's kind of helping out. Of course, this neighbor's allegedly helping out. But finally, TJ does get her connected to family. And then over the Christmas break, she does go back to her father's. Okay. So luckily, she does get back to living with actual grown-ups, by the way. Now, in the meantime, on November 27th, so she's not there very long, but Shirley is placed on suicide watch after an interaction with another inmate that left Shirley crying. So she is kept kind of off and on a light or moderate watch until January 7th. Okay, but she does have a psychiatrist she's meeting with during this time. The psychiatrist does state that Shirley does have suicidal thoughts, but not necessarily any type of suicidal plan or anything like that. And so they do stop the Ativan and the citalopram, thinking that those are causing suicidal thoughts. She does state to other inmates, which of course, they go and tell, that she wanted to, quote unquote, hang herself in the cell. So all of these things are going on. And of course, Shirley is still Shirley. She's still Shirleying. She's still talking as much, or if not, probably more than she normally did. So you can imagine the situation. Now, by December 17th of 2002, the staff there at the correctional facility literally had to reprimand Shirley for disruptive, attention-seeking behavior. And staff members were told to place her in the cell for timeout, yes, if she was misbehaving with them, okay? So, yes. And in the meantime, again, the Bagbys, they are bringing Zachary to see her. They're bringing, when her daughter was there, they're really taking care of Zachary just as any grandparents, but they were exceptional with Zachary, and they were, she was even very complimentary of how they would take care of him. They paid this money. They had to stay overnight for these stays, and they made sure to bring him over for the holiday. In fact, she had wanted all 4 of her children together for the holiday visits, but the Child Protective Services said that they did not, want everybody together. So TJ and then the 2 daughters did visit her before, Christmas. It was on the 23rd. And then the Bagbys came and brought Zachary at a different time or whatever. But the Bagbys are being excellent, even under this awful, strange circumstance. They're just being wonderful. They're being grandparents and taking care of Zachary and taking care of her thus because she's the mother. So on January 7th, 2003, Shirley is removed from the correctional center. So she did have a court date on January 8th. So she's brought into court. Judge Welsh, who is actually kind of the original judge in all of this from what I could see, she does get released. Judge Welsh, even though there was the decision to agree to the extradition, the Judge Welsh does release Shirley again on the same bail requirements while she's working on her appeals. So basically, the decision was made for extradition, but now she's in the appeals stage. And now again, to the Bagby's mystification, and clearly she is, a flight risk. And even the prosecution this time is saying, okay, she's a flight risk. She's already been deemed to be, accepted for extradition, and then you're going to relieve her. Now, I will say so this is all very mystifying that she is back out. So she's no longer jailed. And I will say this is weird to me. I didn't quite understand. So her actual legal aid, so, Canada had provided her with her attorney, the Randy Piercy. So he had been supplied her. It's not like she was paying for him. She didn't have the funds to pay for her attorney. Well, now that she's out, during these hearings, so her legal aid had run out and she was actually having to act as her own attorney, during this hearing, even in January. And so there's a couple more hearings. There's one in February. By March, all of these hearings are taking place to appoint her more legal aid, which she does get Randy back. So, but there's several hearings back and forth just about her getting help, because obviously, the argument is she's going to face serious charges. She is facing serious charges, but she's going to face serious charges, and she needs legal representation. Even though she's a very intelligent and capable woman, obviously she's a doctor, but she still is not trained in the legal field. So again, this has gone on. This began in November of 2001. And now in January of 2002, so this is January 2003, we are kind of back to square one. It feels that way. And I'm sure for the Bagbys is what? Now we've gone through this whole process. She has been deemed to be, agreed to be extradited, but yet now she doesn't have an attorney. Now she needs an attorney. So they basically go through this for a few months, and they're also working on, in the meantime, of course, the Bagbys, they had Zachary that whole time. And then now they're fighting for more custody. And I will say, so at first, of course, they only had the hour once a week. Well, now they're actually getting 3 times a week, 4 hours at a time. Okay, so they do get more visitation rights after they had him that whole time between, Shirley being in jail. So you do have that going on, but it's very weird. So in May, you actually have more decisions going on. So this is happening in May. Dr. Turner's counsel wrote to the Canadian Justice Minister. So they're trying to, fight this, of course. So they say the evidence presented by the Americans against Dr. Turner is entirely circumstantial. Dr. Turner will not receive a fair trial in the United States, both because of her forced reliance on a public defender system. So to say that they don't, that's not going to be favorable, and an unfavorable media attention on the case. Third, Dr. Turner is a mother of 4 children, two of whom were, underage. You've got now, the younger daughter's 13, And then you have Zachary, 10 months. So now they're arguing that, okay, she's got kids here. And then also, Dr. Turner is a Canadian citizen who has contributed greatly to her community. And basically talking about how, as a doctor and a teacher, and, because she was these things, that she has, been a highly regarded member of their community. So, in the reply, so they put this together in May, and then there comes a reply back. Now, it states, Dr. Turner is stated to be a mother of 4. There is evidence from her son and other individuals who wrote in for her support that she is a good mother and has made valuable, contributions to Canadian society. It is certainly tragic when children, though no fault of their own, are separated from their mother. But it is also noted that Dr. Turner has apparently been and it is notated that Dr. Turner has apparently been an excellent member of Canadian society. However, even if Dr. Turner has suffered due to the extradition proceedings taken against her here and negative media reports, I have concluded that surrendering her to face a trial in the United States for the offenses alleged against her would not shock the conscience or be unjust or oppressive in the circumstances below. So the offenses against her are extremely serious. Dr. Turner should not, like any individual in Canada with dependent children, avoid prosecution for that reason. In Canada, parents like Dr. Turner with dependent children are refused bail or convicted of criminal offense and sentenced to a period of incarceration. So they're saying basically just because she's, if she had done this crime here, she would still have to face these crimes, these things. Now, if Dr. Turner were convicted of first-degree murder in Canada, she would be sentenced and imprisoned for, 25 years of the sentence at minimum. Now, Dr. Turner will have the opportunity to present her personal circumstances to the Pennsylvania courts during her bail hearing and to the trial judge. So basically, they're coming back and saying, basically to surrender Dr. Turner would not be inconsistent or go against the extradition act that is in place. So they're saying that the arguments against extradition and they are assuring in this, so this surrender order, so they're basically under those conditions agreeing to the surrender order of the extradition. So they're saying, yes, she should be extradited. This was put in place in June of 2003. Okay, so this was the judge's decision and something, again, goodness, we've been waiting on. So this is happening in May, June. Now, I will go back a little bit. Again, her youngest daughter, because of her incarceration, had been back with her father. She was doing well. She was doing well in school. Evidently, she had always been really good in school before all of this took place. I will say this. So the youngest daughter, she does come back for a visit again over that Easter holiday in 2003. And she is supposed to be there for a visit. She's supposed to just stay for a couple days. Well, here we are on repeat. Shirley is calling, her ex-husband and saying, no, she's going to stay. Sorry, she wants to stay. It's her decision. So Child Protective Services is again called, to let them know that this is what's going on. They make notes, they're checking in, and they actually note by June, so the same time as this extradition decision is being made, that, her daughter, and of course she's been in like 6 different schools, by the way, in this last couple of years. So she had 6 different school changes going on. So they do know that even though she had always done well previously, she failed 2 subjects. So she had actually failed 2 subjects. And on top of this, the Child Protective Services notate that Shirley herself was very stressed whenever they had come for the home visit. And she even mentioned that she had slapped the younger daughter twice on the face. And it was because of the younger daughter not listening to her and calling her an idiot. Now, Shirley had literally turned in the stepmom for swatting the daughter on the thigh back in 2002. So now she's saying, okay, they discussed with her this physical this physical punishment to the child wasn't suitable and such. And pretty much Shirley just even mentioned that the child was just hard to deal with and that she really needed to go back and live like with her father again, that that's what they were thinking about doing. And this whole time she had wanted the child to be with her. She was telling the girl things like, I want to see you as much as possible while I can because of all these legal situations going on. I don't know how much longer I'll even be, in the country or whatever. So all of this is going on, and this is in June. So basically, things at home are strained and stressed. These are all things that are notated, and you can imagine. I mean, she has a young child, a baby at home. She's facing all these legal troubles, and then she's dealing with, a 13-year-old child, and of course, this poor child has been through this, and I will say the child, I mean, Shirley point blank said how much the child was doing in the home. Like she was like doing all the cooking, all the cleaning for Shirley. Like she was doing a massive amount of things that most children do not have to do. So, not to say that it was bad for her to do chores by any means, but she is literally taking care of a mother and a baby, basically. So she was doing a lot more than she should have. All these things are being notated. Okay, nothing's being done about it, but they're being notated. Someone's notating. Now, little side note, Shirley is meeting with Dr. Doucette's son. Now, she meets with Dr. Doucette on July 15th and gets 30 tablets of lorazepam, like lorazepam prescribed at this time. And she notates to him and others whenever she's, she is talking. So she's telling people she's got these pills and she's only supposed to take them as needed. And then she's only going to, she intends to take very little of them. We'll get into the whole pills, but she is prescribed these pills on July 15th of 2003. And then she doesn't have another set appointment with Dr. Doucette until August 18th at 9:30. She will never make that appointment. Now, on July 21st, they have a birthday party for Zachary. They have it like at a McDonald's. They've invited people. The Bagby-this are there, and it is very clear that Zachary is preferring to spend time with the Bagby-this or really anyone other than Shirley, quite honestly. Like Shirley even states at the party, like people see this happen, you take him. He obviously loves you more than me. Why don't you take him? And then she goes off at the party and sits on her own and cries and gets on her phone and calls people. So this goes on even at the child's birthday party, and this is the 21st of July. Now, on the 30th of July, the Bagby-this literally drive Shirley to an appointment with the Janeway Family Services. So they are actually like work with families, work with mothers. They discuss that Zachary has, no attachment to Shirley. So they discuss how they can make this better. Again, the Bagby-this literally drove her to this appointment. Like they have been consistently doing everything they could for Zachary and even having to deal with Shirley, which of course you can only imagine that horrendousness. Now, August 5th, there is a home visit again from Child Protective Services. It's happening about every couple weeks, and Shirley has moved. So she does, and at this visit, Shirley is in a different apartment. So she had apartments, she just moved into an apartment. This apartment was like month to month, and by this time, so her younger daughter is still there with her, but she does state that she's going back, like it's already set in stone. Within that week, she's going back to live with her dad, and she's going to stay with her dad for a while. Like that has been arranged and decided. And again, that was something that Shirley had mentioned needed to be done like back in June. So that is a good thing for the daughter. Now, at this home visit, Shirley mentions that she'll be interviewed. She mentioned that she has an interview set up with CBS's 48 Hours. Now, evidently, she does relay that she won't get any money per se from this interview, and that this interview will not air until like after all the legal extradition or trial is like completed. So, and this interview will actually never take place, but it is set. Now, July 24th of 2003, there is, and another thing. So, by the way, her son TJ, and then he has a girlfriend. They are living with Shirley and Zachary. They have moved in, and he is still. It's July, so I guess he's out on summer break from college, but he's like working in a bakery at this time. But like he has a serious girlfriend. They are living with Shirley, so the four of them are living in like this duplex. Okay, This is a side note that is very important. So on July 24th, a young man comes forward and talks to the police, the constabulary, and he mentions that in July he had met a woman named Shirley Turner. He mentions that they had begun a relationship and that they had dated and it had turned into a sexual relationship. And he was much younger, by the way. He was very young man. And Shirley quit very quickly. I mean, this was July 24th, and he had actually met her like around the 1st of July. So this was a very quick deal. Okay. But already, like, they dated for a minute. She became, in his quote unquote words, like weird, obsessive. Like she was calling him, like she would call him 200 times a day. Okay. So she was calling this young man, and he was very, very concerned. Like he wanted, he broke it off with her. He told her he didn't want to date her anymore. This was very concerning. So he is talking to the police about all this. And of course he's relaying that, and of course he knows what kind of legal trouble she is. Now, the kicker with this is this young man doesn't make a formal report. Like he won't give his name. He won't make a formal complaint or report. So pretty much nothing is done with this information. And quite frankly, had this young man made a formal report, there would have been a lot of consequences for her because she is under, because of the whole legal proceedings that she's under. Okay. So, but he doesn't make a report. And so nothing happens. So she's basically harassing him, but he doesn't report it formally. Around August 11th, Shirley and Zachary and TJ, they actually, and probably the girlfriend, they actually go to visit Shirley's mom. So they take a visit. They visit Shirley's mom. They visit all of that side of the family. Shirley actually talks to one of her, brothers. Like she's taking a family visit. This is happening between August 11th and the 15th. Now, on Saturday, August 16th, 2003, so she's back in St. John. Zachary, and the Bagbys actually go swimming at this place, the Bowring Park. So they go swimming. They take pictures. They have a great day. Zachary's in the swimming pool, and Kate's with them. Like they're all together. And the Bagbys will notate later, like absolutely nothing was unusual at all. Like she was normal Shirley. She was her talkative self. She was just talking. Everything seemed to be normal with Shirley. There was nothing alarming. They didn't feel alarmed. They will say it was unusual. So Zachary had actually fallen asleep on the drive home. And when they got home, Shirley made sure to wake him up and say goodbye to his grandparents. And it's just something, one of those things, those comments that in hindsight was like weird, but at the moment was not. But basically that she was like, you may not get to see them, or something about not being able to see your grandparents all the time. Something to that effect that, again, in that moment did not seem weird, but would be weird. Now, on this same day, this young man that, Shirley had dated, he does have a date with another young woman. It's a full day. It goes into the night. Like they live, it's August. They live, on the water. They go along walking on the beach, And evidently, Shirley is actually walking along the beach. She's kind of trailing this couple. She's kind of keeping an eye on this couple. Now, on August 17th, Shirley is writing letters. Like, she writes several letters that are later found. She writes letters for all of her children. They're kind of dated different dates, though. They're not dated the 17th. They're dated, some of them are dated August 17th, some are dated in July, like there's different dates, but she does write and leave letters for all of her children. And she does also talk to her oldest daughter on the phone. Now, her oldest daughter does say later that her mom, pretty much sounded normal, except she wasn't as talkative as she normally is. And again, Shirley is known to be talkative. Now, Shirley does take Zachary to get some food that day. She takes him to get some chicken nuggets and fries or whatever. And she is driving TJ's car, which he doesn't really like for her to drive his car. She doesn't have a license in Newfoundland, so like she's not legally supposed to be driving. And of course, she's on bail for murder. So a lot of things that she shouldn't be doing. Now, she does visit a few different friends on the 17th, and all of whom will say later that she was pretty much her normal self as well. Like nothing weird, the Bagby, just like the Bagbys, they didn't notice anything weird. Yeah. And so the only weird thing at this point was just that her daughter said she wasn't as talkative. Now, she does get that, remember that Ativan or the lorazepam? It's lorazepam prescription. The prescription by Dr. Doucette. She does fill that prescription. So she had it since the 15th. So now it is August 17th. So she never got it filled. She does go and pick up those pills. Okay, so she has those pills. And she does mention, while she's visiting like her friends, she talks about how she's getting the prescriptions done. She even talks about a future trip like the next day. Like she has like a check coming in for Andrew's benefit. So the Bagbys were actually going to take her to Corner Brook to pick up the check and such. And she was going to do, some shopping, like get some, food and things for Zachary. Now, on the night of August 17th, 2003, so she did all those errands during the day. She got the pills. Now, TJ and his girlfriend are home that night, and Shirley's at home. But Shirley gets like a phone call from one of her friends, and TJ's girlfriend picks up and just says, Shirley's unavailable. She believes that Shirley's asleep because, it's 10:30 at night. She has a baby. She thinks she's gone to bed. Now, Shirley does get up at about 11:30 and she returns this call. Like she finds out about the phone call. She returns the call. She misses that phone call. So she calls that girlfriend back and she leaves. She doesn't get the girl. The girl's out, but she leaves a very weird message on the girlfriend's voice. Now, I guess and it discusses how she was like, it's very weird because by phone records, it will be very clear that she called the girl from at home. Okay. But she makes it sound like she's actually calling this girlfriend from that young man's house, like that she had gotten back together with him and that she was calling from his house. Like that's how she makes it sound. And of course, that's not true. That's not true information. Now, at the same time, and of course, this is all within around 11:30 or so, she leaves a message for her younger daughter because she doesn't get her. And then she makes one more call to that same couple that she had visited during the day, and she doesn't get them either. Like now she's calling people too late. So they're actually asleep. So shortly after these calls are made, and TJ is going to bed, like he has to get up early for work. So he's going to bed. He's like already in bed. The girlfriend is downstairs still watching TV. A little bit after, like around midnight, TJ hears his mom leave the house. And she leaves the house with Zachary. Like the girlfriend actually sees them. So she sees them walk out the door. Now, TJ thinks that she just must be running to the store to get something for Zachary. And now I will say, there's nothing weird about this. Evidently, it was not uncommon for Shirley to maybe put the baby in the car and like run him around like so he'll fall asleep, like if he was fussy. So it wasn't totally abnormal for her and Zachary to be out this late at night. just if in case like this was just kind of what they would do. They would kind of drive around or whatever. Now, TJ and the girlfriend finally goes to bed. They go to sleep, they go to bed. Now, a witness will see, a witness will come forward later who actually sees Shirley around 12:45 p.m. and doesn't know that it's Shirley, but she will later on get the connection. Now, she is out on what's called Perrins Road in Long Pond. It's kind of a community about 24 miles, to the east of where Shirley is, okay, from her apartment. Now, Shirley evidently Shirley had pulled into a driveway because she was kind of looking, she says she's looking for something. So she sees this person, this witness, on a balcony, and Shirley asks for directions to Fagan Road, and specifically the actual young man's, she says the young man's name, and she asks, where he lives. So the woman, gives her directions to where this is, and we'll note later she didn't see anyone else in the car with Shirley. She does see a car seat, but it's dark. She can't see anything else going on. And she just remarks that Shirley was in a white top. Now, Shirley makes a call from her actual cell phone, and she calls this gentleman's house. It's 1:15 a.m. It's on Monday, August 18th. So she leaves this young man a voicemail. Now, this night it is August, so it's summer, but there's storms. There's storms building in the area. It's actually going to be storming from 4 to 5 in the morning. It's hazy, it's rainy, it's kind of foggy. The visibility is very low, and it's about 68 degrees that night, just to kind of give you an idea of this August evening in Canada. So Shirley drives to where she got the directions to this young man's house. She leaves a series of photographs. So one photograph she leaves at a Hickey's ambulance service, and it's not very clear, but this is where the young man works. So she leaves a photograph there to be found. Then she leaves 2 pictures under the young man's vehicle, which is parked outside his duplex. Now, one of the pictures is of her and Zachary, and then the other picture is just of her, and she's wearing not much of anything, okay? It says that she's just wearing underwear or whatever. Now, she also leaves a used tampon. Now, speculation later on, obviously nobody knows the why, but this is alleged that this was possibly to frame this young man, okay? She leaves TJ's car around the corner from this man's duplex, or this man's home, and she parks the car. She leaves the car open. She leaves Zachary's baby bag in the car. She leaves the keys to the car in the baby bag. Everything's unlocked and open. She just leaves the car. She walks away from the car. Now, around 3 a.m., there is a night watchman that is working at this Foxtrot Marina, which is right down the way from this man's house. It is just right there. And this is a marina. There's a little building. So this night watchman, it's about 3. It's kind of it's been kind of on and off sprinkling. It's kind of a hazy night. It is windy. So, and especially how it's sometimes just windy down by the water in general. But anyway, he notates, and he has really loud music playing on, but he notates that he hears a baby. So he turns down the music. He actually checks this out, and he opens up the door to where he's at, and he does see a figure. He doesn't see a baby, but he sees someone small wearing a white shirt walking kind of. So he's seeing Shirley at this time. So this Foxtrot Marina, right by, down from where she left her car, right down where, this young man lived. At around 6:30 or so, TJ does wake up. He's going to be heading into work, and he notices that his car is not home. And then he realizes that his mother and Zachary are not home. So he calls into work. He lets them know that he cannot make it into work, the situation. He does begin at that time calling around to his mom's friends. Okay, so he begins calling Shirley's friends. Now, I will say at the same time, like during the morning time, people are notating that they are seeing this blue, it's like a blue topaz car just kind of parked a little bit on the side of like Fagan's Road where Shirley had left the car. So people are seeing the car. So TJ is just calling around checking. Finally, at 11:27 a.m., after not being able to contact his mom at all and, just very concerned, he reports Shirley and Zachary as missing. So this is 11:27 a.m. The police actually start the report process a little bit afterwards. They're going to show up and interview, get like an interview done with TJ. TJ does eventually make it into work. So the police are now, they put out like a press release looking for Shirley. They begin talking to her friends. They do get a hold of her friend in St. John that Shirley had left the weird message about, like she had called and left that message with that friend saying, making it sound like she was actually having an overnight stay with that man. So the police are like talking to the friend. They kind of piece together this man's name. So they do get in touch with him. And he has gone on to like work the day, but he does contact the police around, I want to say around 2 o'clock that day. He does make connection with the police. And he actually does tell them like he wasn't aware that Shirley even drove. But when the police ask him if he has seen this particular car, like TJ's car, he does say, well, come to think about it, I did see this car. It's kind of parked near my place. I passed it and it was just like on the side of the road. So now the police know where the car is. They're looking in the car, they're piecing this all together. Probably around 6 p.m., they do let the Bagbys know that Shirley and Zachary are missing. So, of course, that's a horrible situation. They let them know that they had been missing since this morning. And, of course, they're extremely concerned. The initial thought by the Bagbys and by their attorney and such was that, Shirley had just taken the baby and taken off. That was what everybody was thinking. Unfortunately, that would not be the case. Now, around 7:30, there was a couple, a husband and wife. They were on vacation from Ontario. They were taking a walk along what's called Manuel's Beach. It's a few miles down, kind of north from that marina that we discussed. So the couple was kind of walking. They were near the embankment, like looking, out at the ocean and whatever. And I will say this is a very rocky situation, and we'll talk about this. But they do see about 100 yards at the edge of the embankment. The husband looks and kind of sees what looks like a body. And as he comes closer, he does realize it's a woman's body that he's found. So they call 911 from their cell phone. They get help right away, and the phone call happened around 7:13 p.m. Now, a little bit, only within minutes, the Canadian Coast Guard, they show up, and they do see the body, which will turn out to be Dr. Turner's body. They do see her face down, and around 50 to 70 yards from her, kind of further along this Manuel's Beach, the body of an infant. It is the body of Zachary, and he is laying face up. So now both Dr. Turner and Zachary are found. And of course, this will prove to be totally devastating. Dr. Turner, is wearing platformed heels, by the way, just to give you an idea. There is a jacket about 20 feet from her, and it's said to be a jacket in some cases, or a sweater. So what they'll find and what the findings will say as far as the police investigation of this is that Shirley had knotted this jacket around herself and around Zachary, like strapping Zachary to her with this jacket. So they do find this jacket now, and she had been seen wearing this jacket. And of course, the police, the constabulary police, they this had been in the news, all over the news, looking for Dr. Turner, looking for Zachary. They were, posted as missing, by the families and by the police. So this was big news. Now by 7:30, the constabulary police, they do get a hold of the Bagby's attorney, Jackie Brazil, and they do meet back at the Bagby's home. They had already been there 90 minutes before to let the Bagby's know that, Shirley was missing and that she had Zachary, Zachary was missing. So they were aware of that. They had their priest from their parish there, St. Michael's Parish, and so they do have to go in and tell the Bagbys what happened. Immediately, David Bagby, just his go-to was anger, just like when he found out about Andrew, he, threw the phone. That was just his initial reaction, was just rage, anger, devastation. Now, Kathleen, she collapses to the floor. She just collapses. And eventually David collapses as well. It is full blown, the worst possible situation. And of course, they are grief stricken and whatnot. They have to go and the Bagbys have to go and identify Zachary's body. I don't think it's TJ. I think her attorney, the Randy Piercy, he identifies Shirley. And then I will say I told you that Adelaide, which was her mother-in-law. So she actually claims, Shirley's body and takes care of all the funeral arrangements. TJ is devastated. And of course, Shirley's family, this whole time, they're being, lied to and gaslit. And, they believed that Shirley was innocent. TJ believed that his mother was innocent. But he will say in an interview, it's something that can't be forgiven. All the years that she was good to me as a mother was pretty much thrown out the window at the end. He believes that she did kill Andrew, and of course he knows that she killed his brother. So yes, so the police come in, they investigate to make sure that there's not any third party involved in this. The coroner, they immediately call in the medical examiner. Once they find the body, the medical examiner comes around 7:54. They preview the bodies. They will autopsy the body. As far as what they believe happened, and based on the witness hearing the baby cries at the marina, the fact that there was another fact. Again, this is a very rocky terrain, like to get to the ocean here at this area of Newfoundland. Very, very rocky. So they believe that she went to the actual marina because that would have been the easiest access to the ocean, because they did, where the bodies were found at this Manuel's Beach, there is a quote unquote beach access, but it's more or less covered in thorns. It's not an easy route. She was wearing platform shoes and she had no abrasions, no scratches, no anything to like her feet, ankle, legs. So that's how they deduced like where they felt like she went into the ocean, was that Foxtrot Marina there. The police will believe that, around the time period, around 3 a.m., Shirley straps Zachary to her chest and she just walks off the marina, jumps into the water, and that's the end for the two of them. Now, of course, there will be autopsy, done on both of them. They do toxicology as well. They do find that there was no alcohol in both of their systems. They do find that there was the lorazepam prescription that she had. They do find that in both of their systems. And they do deduce that Zachary died by drowning. She died by drowning. So they do understand those facts. And like I said, based on her body, they can see that she didn't go through a rocky terrain or thorns or anything like that to get to the ocean. Deduce that, poor Zachary, he probably did not feel anything, when she went into the ocean, just because of the, the drugs that she had given him. That was a very small bit of peace, to the Bagbys, is that he didn't suffer. So of course they are devastated. They are in control of Zachary's remains. They do have him cremated, just like they did with Andrew, which was Andrew's wish. And so they do sprinkle his ashes along with his father's in England, in St. Louis, and such. That was important to them. But they do give some of the ashes to Shirley's family. According to what I read, some of his ashes are buried with Shirley. And they do have a funeral that had 300 to 400 people at it in Newfoundland for Zachary. The Bagbys, again, they are devastated, just like with before. But this time, they do channel their rage and grief and everything immediately become activists. And of course, they were instrumental in advocating for Andrew's death, for justice for Andrew. And then, of course, when Zachary came along, taking care of him. And they are angry. They're angry at the system. So they hold a press conference on September 3rd, 2003, there in Newfoundland. They hold a conference, and they pretty much, even though they're their attorney, Jackie, was like, well, you're still under kind of like a gag order situation with the courts. But they're like, you know what are they going to do? Like, arrest us. They're angry. They're angry at the courts. And so they do make it very clear that, Shirley was 100% responsible for Zachary's death. But they, make it very clear that the government and the Child Protective Services were responsible for letting her out on bail, a suspected murder, first-degree murder, and then letting her have, custody of Zachary. Like, those two things sealed his death. And she, her being totally responsible. And I will say, the medical examiner do post that her death was suicide. They post that Zachary was homicide, so he was killed by Shirley. They do, come to the conclusion that she worked alone. So yes, she worked alone and did this on her own. But again, just totally devastating. Now, obviously, because Shirley is dead, the constabulary, police, the government in Canada, they have to notify the Pennsylvania. So they have to notify the United States that Shirley is deceased. Of course, because she's dead, they can no longer go after her. So all of these court proceedings are, struck, basically, they have to be closed. Now, what does happen, though, is the Child Protective Services, as far as that goes, there is a case opened on, Zachary's death, and that will culminate into, a large review, which this review is in my reference, in my notes. This was a huge, research for me, this whole review. So it is very interesting, but the review basically cites that, yes, the fact that the government's involvement killed Zachary. Like, he would be alive if Dr. Shirley Turner had not been granted bail, period. So the review didn't even start until about 2005. It didn't result to end until about a year or so later. The review is huge and went into great depth and looked at, everything that the Child Protective Services did, everything that the government did. So they did conclude this kind of in this time frame around, I want to say 2007. So David, and again, they are David and Kate are actively giving press conferences and talking to everybody they can about making changes, with the bail and with the Child Protective Services. So they are right away, right from the start, they are advocating for change because, this situation, hurt their family, of course, personally. And Kate actually does become a child activist in the courts, period. She is an activist for others. She's helping others, something repeatedly. Of course, they we're constantly doing good work for all. Okay. So even after the horrendous death of Zachary, the fact that Shirley killed their son and then their grandson, devastated their family twice. So yes, but they go on, they're doing great things. So they do advocate. David himself writes a book. So you've got the review that is posted in my notes. I will post David's book as well. He wrote a book called Dance with the Devil. It's about the whole situation with what Dr. Shirley Turner, did to Andrew, just the whole thing. And after the books come out, after the review comes out, they do advocate, and eventually they do get a bill set in place. So is exciting. So it is a bill, and it is called Bill C-464, or otherwise known as Zachary's bill. So basically, after the review comes out, and the review is, scathing of the system, I will say the Child Protective Services manager, that was manager at the time, she has to step down. So she steps down. There are a lot of changes, the Bagby's voice and the Bagby's press on this definitely made changes happen with Child Protective Services, but they wanted more. The Bagby's wanted more. So they do go to legislators, there in Newfoundland. And again, they do have, Zachary's bill, which does change the criminal code in Canada to allow the courts to justify refusing bail to those accused of serious crimes in the name of protecting, children. So it is about that. It is all about protecting. And it looks like this bill is signed into law in December of 2010. It is amazing. And it does give the Bagby's a sense that, they have actually, their cries and their hurt have been listened to, and they just want to save other people from this horrendous tragedy that has happened. I had actually seen the Dear Zachary documentary film like way, way back before I even had a podcast, but I did not necessarily use that film as like research, but I will plug the film. The film is excellent. It is so sad. It's a good watch. Definitely go and watch the film, and you get to see footage. Like basically the director, he wrote it and directed. His name is Kurt. He was, best friends with Andrew. And so his initial thought when Andrew was killed was to put together this film for David and Kate. Okay, it wasn't supposed to be distributed or released or anything like that. And then when everything happened, when he found out about Zachary being born, and then of course just all of this horribleness comes out, he does complete the actual film, and it's Dear Zachary, a letter to his son about his father. So it does actually get released in about 2008, and it's just it's definitely a good and important watch. And as far as documentaries go, a very good documentary, but definitely go watch that. That is in my notes as well. Since then, they do have memorials set up for Andrew, and that is very important. They do have, he was really into photography. They have like a photography award set up at the Faculty of, Medicine there in Newfoundland at the Memorial University. So they definitely, have, Zachary's Law. They have scholarships. They have 2 scholarships set up in tribute to, Andrew, Dr. Andrew Bagby. So that, there's like 2 scholarships set up for medical students that are actually, it's set up with the Latrobe Hospital. So that is very important. And then of course you do have the Andrew Bagby and Zachary Bagby bursary fund, which supports students at the Memorial University of Newfoundland. So you have memorials set up to remember, but I can earnestly say if you listen to this case, if you watch the documentary, you will definitely never forget this case. It is horrifically sad, but it is definitely just an awesome example of these very loving parents, David and Kate, stepping up, advocating for Andrew, advocating for Zachary, and then advocating for other children that are in the situation, and actually advocating for change to be made regarding children so that, there's not another situation that comes up to, that another child is going to get, fall through the cracks and be with, someone that is potentially going to harm them. So like this situation. So it's just an unbelievable case. It's unbelievable that we have these people out there doing these awful things. And unfortunately we do, but hopefully this system will recognize it. Every little change can help. So thank you so much for listening. Let me know your thoughts on this case. Let me know if you're from Canada, if you know this area. I definitely thank you guys for listening, and go check me out on all the social medias and leave me a 5-star review. Thanks so much. Bye.